got a big sale coming through. I need to scale up and have more hardware for all that traffic because I don't want to lose that traffic. And then when I'm done, I can just scale back down and go back down to normal. We want to make this really easy for your application to do. This shouldn't require any engineering or any sophisticated architecture. It should just magically happen. We also want to focus on pay for what you use. So this isn't about buying those servers in case you need those servers or leasing bigger servers in case you need them, but only paying for the servers when you use them, just like a rental car. So I'm only going to get rent that big truck when I need the big truck. And this is something that I really like, is the democratization of big resources. There are some things out there that I think every website could benefit from that we often don't leverage because it's the domain of really big companies with big budgets. Think of a global content distribution network cache nodes that most vendors that do that charge $5,000 just to sign the contract, and then it's thousands of dollars per month after that. It's very expensive, and if you don't know that you're really, really going to get a lot out of it, your customer's probably not going to want to pay for that. When we look at the cloud, we can get that benefit, we can get those capabilities and actually pay very little money for that. So that's one example of where we can now, anyone can leverage these kind of big enterprise, big data center ideas, even on their neighborhood website, if you will. Now, this isn't necessarily the approved corporate definition. This is just my definition. And these are the 4 patterns that you'll often see cloud computing really used for. The bottom 2 are the most common. Predictable bursting, like the weekend after Thanksgiving, that's a big spike. The week before my birthday, that's another big e-commerce spike. And we know those spikes are going to happen, so we can plan our hardware around that. Although I have had customers in the past who had a big weekend coming up and they don't bother to tell you, they just think magically it'll be okay. So this is something we can plan for, even in a traditional environment. It takes a lot more work. It's the unpredictable bursting that you can't plan for. Somehow someone tweets about something on your website and that goes viral, right? And suddenly you get tens of thousands of people come to your website per minute, and you have no idea this is going to happen, and there's no way that you can respond in time to capture that traffic. And the worst part about that is you only have one chance to make that first impression. So if they come to your site, and because it's just getting slammed by traffic, your site's not responding properly, because any server can only handle so much traffic, they're going to have a bad experience, and they're probably not going to come back. So we want to be able to respond to that. And I've worked at companies where, and these are just medium-sized companies, these even aren't even big red tape companies. It'll take 3 months just to order a server and get it racked and deployed. And 3 months is a little bit longer than your typical unpredictable burst. Growing fast is, I see a lot in the Joomla community where we're going to roll our application out. We have a few customers, and over time, our customer base is going to grow, or your customer's customer base. So as they start selling more product online, or as their website becomes more popular, you'll get more and more traffic, and as that traffic increases, I need to add more and more resources. I don't want to buy all of those resources early on in my website lifecycle because I don't know if I'm going to need it yet, right? And this is also kind of the startup curve, which is kind of popular in this part of the world where I have a startup and I hope I get that hockey stick effect. And if I do that, I want to take all my resources and focus them on the application because that's what's going to make me money, not on buying hardware and infrastructure that I may not need yet. And the top one is one that is really hard for traditional IT people to think about because we're used to thinking about IT in static resource levels. I have 5 servers, that's how many I have, that's the amount of work I can get done. In the cloud, we can create a server, use it for an hour, and discard it. So I have some customers, they make their money with advertising on their website. They have roughly 100 web servers. This is all running on PHP actually. And they gather a ton of data on the marketing of the ads on that website. Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Kind of A/B testing, all those sorts of different things. And it took hours for that data to be crunched to get marketing a report. So they could only really get a marketing report about once a month for them to make business decisions on what they were doing. So what we did is we moved all of that to the cloud and wrote a little app for the marketing guy. We put his credit card on the subscription, and he could type in his email address and the date range of the marketing report, and a button that said "Do it." And he would just click that. He knew every time he clicked that, that would cost him $5 or $7, And we would spin up a bunch of servers, crunch all that data, generate the reports he needed, email them to him, and shut them all down again in about an hour, which is why it cost only a few dollars. So he could choose when he ran that report. He could choose when it's going to cost him $5, and he could run it daily. In this time frame of the year, he'd want to run it daily, and in the slow part of the season in the summer, he wouldn't run it as often. So that's a really unique use of the cloud that we have that we can't do on premises, really. There are 3 models to the cloud that you'll often see. IaaS is probably the most common one right now, infrastructure as a service. That means I need a server, and they're going to give me a server, and I have complete control over that server. So, as we know, with great control comes great responsibility. And if I say, boom, I need 10 servers, now I have 10 servers to manage. In the middle, we have what's called platform as a service. So you're going to get everything that your app needs, but you're going to still write the app and take care of the data. So in a Joomla world, that means you're going to give me a PHP stack and probably the Joomla platform, and I'm just going to deploy my site in and on top of that. And then we have, and in this environment, you're building your app and focusing on the building of your app. And I still get some control over the underlying infrastructure, but it's not in my face. I don't have to know how to manage Windows or know how to manage Linux. I can just tell the cloud, hey, I want 5 servers and I want them networked this way, and it goes and makes that happen for you. So this is where most of the unicorns are used in our platform. And then software as a service is where there's a software out there that you're consuming. You don't know how it is written, you don't know how it's managed, you don't know how it's run, but you're leveraging it in your business. So how many of you have an email address? This is required, raise your hand, I'm going to kick you out of the room. And how many of you control the mail server that is running on it? So very few of you, right? Most of you probably have a Google address or a live.com or Yahoo or something like that. And you have no idea where those servers are, what software they're running, how they're backed up, how they manage DR, any of that stuff. That's a software as a service. I'm consuming that service. And the cloud offers a lot of services that you can consume into your application to make it better. Like that content delivery caching I was talking about. You're not moving your app, you're not changing your app, you're just leveraging that service from the cloud to make your app better. So generally speaking, when you look at where should my app live, you want to be to the right of this graph as much as possible, because that keeps your hands off the infrastructure and lets you focus more on what you're building and what you're deploying and what you're doing. But sometimes you do need really under the hood control, and that's why you can always move to the left. So Amazon's probably the most popular in this part. Google App Engine's kind of over here. We have, and Amazon really has services across the board. We have services across the board. Our biggest strength are probably in these 2 categories. We're just rolling out the VM support as we speak. So another way to look at these diagrams, if I'm doing this on my premise, I have to own this whole stack. Networking, the storage, the servers, the virtualization tier, all that stuff. And just as a visual guide, when I'm doing that IaaS, the vendor's giving me the bottom half of that stack, and I still manage the top half. So if I tell that vendor, give me 10 Linux servers, I'm managing those 10 servers. I'm responsible for backing them up. I'm responsible for networking them and securing them and all of that. Platform as a service, again, I'm only focusing on my application and data. The runtime, in this case, PHP and so on, all the way down is handled for me. And then software as a service, I don't have any concern. I'm just going to consume that service the way I want. Okay, so let's get to some details. Hopefully you've seen at Microsoft over the past 10 years, I'm part of the new generation at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for 5 years. And my generation is really trying to change how the company works. Hopefully you've seen that in not only what we talk about, but what we actually do. And so when we built Windows Azure, started building it years and years ago, but we released it first 4 years ago, we spent $2.5 billion just building the first set of data centers that we had. So this is a huge investment for us. And we knew, one, it had to be flexible. It had to meet the demands of the customers, that we didn't know how customers were going to use it, and we needed to be able to change over time rapidly. And you'll see we deploy new features probably every couple months, which sometimes can make it challenging because it's changing every couple months. But that means that if there's something that you need that's not there, it's probably going to be there pretty quickly. Open, this is completely built on open standards and open protocols and things like that. We have finally kicked the the habit of inventing our own protocols that are already out there, right? So thank God we finally did that. And so this is completely built, and this isn't meant to be the Windows cloud or the .NET cloud. This is meant to be Microsoft's cloud. We want it to be the best place to run PHP apps, to run Joomla apps. We want it to be the best, fastest place for that stuff to run, and not only in the cloud but on premises. And I think all the things that we've been releasing lately and the contributions we have made back to open source hopefully prove that. We're one of the top 10 contributors to Linux right now. I don't know if very few people even know that. We really believe in that, and that's why in our cloud not only can you run Windows servers, but you can run Linux servers all day long if you want as well. And we have hired lots of engineers to support that for you, so when you call up and you have a problem, we have people that actually know Linux and understand Linux. They're not just Windows guys with a new bumper sticker on their car. They truly are Linux lovers. And solid, if you're going to bet your business on this, you have to be able to depend on that. You have to be able to rely on it. If it goes down, it makes you look bad to your customers, and we understand that. We're the only vendor with a financial penalty in the SLA. Most vendors will merely give you an extra day's credit for free, kind of like your cable bill. They'll give you an extra day cable for free. We actually give you money back if there's an outage or a failure. A small percentage of Exchange Online customers were affected by a failure this past month, and it was only for a couple hours, and it was actually a small set of customers, but all of the customers on that node, we gave them all a 25% credit back on their bill for the money they've paid, just to make sure that we covered everyone who might have been covered effectively. All right, so we have 8 data centers now around the world. That's the blue dots here. We have one here in California. I won't comment on the thinking behind building a data center in California, but one in Chicago, San Antonio, Texas, Virginia, Dublin, Ireland. This data center is completely outside. If we have time afterwards, I'll talk about that. Amsterdam, that's the party data center, and then Singapore and Hong Kong. And we wanted a global footprint because any app you deploy today, whether it be a web app, right? How many of you are building phone apps or tablet apps, right? Those are global by default. If I put an app in the Apple Store or the Google Store or the Microsoft Store, anyone around the world can pretty much buy that app. So suddenly, the code I'm pushing out, anyone around the world can run. It's not just the people that go to the store down the street anymore. And so we needed to build infrastructure that could support that. Later on, I'll talk about how you can deploy your app to multiple data centers and kind of make them all work together. We have a really tight SLA, and again, the goal is for everything you only pay for what you use. So we, for example, on the compute side, charge by the CPU core, and how many of them you're using by the hour. Those sorts of things. All right, so again, the infrastructure as a service, the platform as a service, and the software as a service. Virtual machines, you can say, hey, I just need a virtual server or a number of servers. We can run Windows or Linux on those. You choose the versions that you want. We have several distros of Linux that we support. And we have this concept of virtual private networking. So if you have an e-commerce app or an app that needs to dip into an enterprise database, and that database is not in the cloud, you can set up a virtual private network between the cloud and your customer's network and let Joomla connect to that local data, that enterprise database, and pull that data out. So that's a very secure way to connect the cloud with the on-premises data center. Very easy to set up. We also have virtual machine portability. So this is built on the VHD standard. VHD stands for virtual hard drive. And many of you probably have worked with VHDs. I know when I was a consultant for a long, long time, every customer, I made its own VHD. So every customer was in its own sandbox when I was working on their projects. And I can take those VHDs and move them from my data center up to Windows Azure and run them there. And not only that, I can bring them back down locally. So we do that. We call that a cloud bursting, where I'm going to run my app locally 99% of the time. And on that big week or that big month, let's say it's tax season and you run a tax web app or something like that, I can move that app to the cloud very easily, run it up there, and when that big peak time is done and I don't need the cloud anymore, I can bring it back down locally. We have a lot of e-commerce companies that do that, like think of a pizza company around the Super Bowl time frame. Not only that, but I can take that VHD, that server, and move it to other providers. So it's not about only being able to run that VHD at Windows Azure. It's about running that wherever virtual machines are supported and whichever vendor meets the needs that your app has. so you can move it around. When you run your VHD in Windows Azure, this virtual server, that VHD, is the hard drive of that server, and we run it in, I'm sorry, my animations are screwed up. We run it in, we run that hard drive on 3 different hard drives, so it's replicated. This gives you high availability. One of these hard drives is going to fail. When you have as many millions of hard drives in a data center as we have, some of them fail every day. Just statistically speaking, that's going to happen. So we know that's going to fail. We have the other 2 hard drives ready to go. Your server doesn't even know this happens when this failure happens because we're reading across all 3 at the same time. If one fails, it's no big deal. We start creating a new one. They hold an election to see who's going to be the master, right? And this is a good election. This isn't like a Florida election, right? And not only that, these are actually running these are all SSDs for performance purposes. So we have farms and farms and farms of SSDs. So these 3 replicas give you what's called a high availability. But that doesn't protect you against, I won't use the normal example of California data center or what might happen here. Let's go with, let's say you're using the Chicago data center, and for some reason the United States sells Chicago to the Canadians, right? So suddenly that whole data center goes offline. We have a geo-replication on your storage. So these 3 replicas will get replicated to the sister data center, and you have 3 more replicas in that data center. So you now have 6 replicas of your data, whether it be your virtual server hard drive or images from your website that you've uploaded. 6 replicas to protect against, for high availability and disaster recoverability. That's all free. That's all included in the price of storage, which is roughly 12 cents a gig per month, which is pretty cheap. You can turn this off if you don't need it, and we give you a discount for doing that. So those are VMs. I'm going to show you the VM portal really quickly to see how you create and manage your VMs. So when I log into the Windows Azure portal, you have to have a subscription. We'll talk about that at the end if you want. I'm just going to go to New and choose Compute. And I want a new virtual machine. And I'm going to do from Gallery. And you can see here, these are all the different templates out of the box that we have available. A bunch of Windows Server versions, Windows Server 2012, which just RTM'd. We have CentOS, we have SUSE, we have Ubuntu, we have a couple other distros down below. And I could literally, anyone want to pick one? Ubuntu. So we'll do Ubuntu then. All the Windows licensing are included in your monthly fees, but we also have some baked with SQL Server included if you want to do that. Also, if you scroll down here, see these others called Bacon and Giraffe. These aren't standard images. These are my images that I've built and uploaded. So a lot of companies say, this is the image you shall use for all web servers and you shall not deviate. They can take that image and upload it and let you use it. So let's go with, you said Ubuntu, right? Mm-hmm. We'll go through. We have to give the virtual machine a name. And I don't think I can put an exclamation mark in here, so I apologize. We need a username, not the admin. And back here, I can choose the size of server I want, how many cores I want, how much memory I need. I'm just going to go with a small one. Extra small is shared. It's actually 1/3 of a CPU, but it's only 2 cents an hour. So it's great for if you're going to stage out your site as a testing site for the customer to come in and approve it before you go live, those sorts of things. So you can spin that up, push out the site, let them look at it, and play with it, and then tear it down when they're done looking at it. I need to give it a DNS name. And I skipped over the business of I can pick other. If I have multiple servers running, I can have them network together so they can talk to each other in the cloud. I kind of skipped over those steps. So down here, this is going. What we're doing is we're finding a server that's available because when we give you hardware, it's dedicated to you. No one else is sharing the hardware. So this isn't like a shared hosting platform, which we have. We'll get to that. This is all dedicated capabilities. And we're allocating that hardware, we're spinning that hardware up, we're deploying the base Ubuntu image, we're deploying any other software stacks on top of that you might have asked for. We wire up the network. You have a private network within our data center that only your traffic travels on, that only your servers can see. We wire up DNS, load balancers, firewalls, all of that stuff automatically for you. And this will take about 20 minutes because we are starting the servers up from scratch and doing all of that for you. So we're not going to sit here and watch the thing dance for 20 minutes because that's frankly not very exciting. But that's how easy it is to get a server up and running. And I go to a lot of hackathons, and they will spend hours getting building their own servers, and there's just no need for that. We're in the business of building Joomla websites and helping our customers do e-commerce sites and things like that, not in the business of twiddling with servers and infrastructure. So we just want to get that out of the way and focus on what really makes us money. Oops, I don't want the shared web platform that you're probably used to using at most hosters. That's kind of where our websites product comes into play. And websites out of the box is just a web server and IIS server for you to deploy to. When you create one, you automatically get ASP.NET, Node.js, and PHP already deployed and ready to go for you. You can deploy to it with FTP. Does anyone use Git or GitHub for source control? So you can take this server and connect it to your repo, and let's say to your master branch or something, or your prod branch, and every time you update that branch, it will push that code to the cloud and keep your site updated. And that's how some startups I work with now, that's how they do their deployments, is they just merge to that production branch, and everything kicks out to the cloud. And then we have, this is a free SKU, so you get 10 free websites for life on this free SKU that we have, which limits the amount of hardware and bandwidth and stuff that you can use. But that's how I run my blog, actually. I run my blog on WordPress, on PHP, on Windows Azure. And then, but I can still scale that up. So maybe I'm running in free mode most of the time, and again, I have a really busy weekend. I can go to the scale it up just for that weekend and then scale back down and only pay for that scale. So this is kind of how this works. Here's your happy app. We're running in the shared environment. So there are lots of web apps running on all of these servers in a dense formation. And I can go in, even when I'm in shared mode, I can say, I want to pay a little bit more to get more servers. So I can scale up to 2. And now my app is running on 2 of these servers down here, and we're load balancing across those for you, right? And I'm paying just a little bit of money for that. And I can actually go up to multiple servers on this side. That's still a shared environment. I run into customers that sometimes freak out that they're in a shared environment. I don't know if you've ever run into that. And so we can run into dedicated environments. So we can move over to reserved instances where I have a server dedicated to all of my web apps. And that's the only code running on those servers. I still don't have to manage the servers. I just tell Windows Azure, hey, run my app in a dedicated environment. We set all that up for you. And you can scale these up and down as well. I can say I want 2 servers or 3 or 4 servers, however. I can choose how big those servers are. And the great thing is I can flip, and what I don't have listed up here is the free mode, from free to shared to reserve and back and forth as much as I want, as often as I want. So you don't have to bet on what you're going to need 6 months from now. I can change this on the fly as much as I want. And I can do it through the portal, or I can do it through script from a command line or call a REST web service if you want to do it that way. So you can quickly tune what's going on with your app and control how it's working. And when I run in dedicated mode, all of my web apps come with me and work on that server dedicated together. So I can leverage all of the hardware that's on there. Okay, so again, out of the gate, we have great PHP support. We have really a lot of people inside Microsoft. We have a whole team just dedicated to working with PHP and all of the big platforms that are running on PHP. And we have a lot of passion around that. I did a lot of PHP work early on in my career before I got sucked into the maelstrom of Microsoft. Is anyone familiar with Node.js? Node.js, if you're doing a lot of JavaScript work in the browser, when you need to run server-side code, like maybe a web service or something like that, a lot of people are using Node.js on the server side, which is basically JavaScript on the server side. Very fast, very clean, real under the hood, naked with HTTP, so it's exciting. A lot of cool stuff. I still run into customers that run classic ASP, which is over 10 years old, but they still have stuff running there. And so basically what they're doing is they're creating these websites and pushing those apps out here to get them out of their data center, because they don't want to have to manage that part in their data center All right, so I think I've already talked about this. I can, in the shared environment, I can still just FTP in and deploy the bits that I want. I can do, the Git support is pretty awesome. I do that a lot on my apps that I'm building. Web deploy is something that we use in the .NET world, which is basically FTP with some fancy wrappers around it. And Team Foundation Server is our source control service, a lot like, well, it's not a lot like Git, but it's similar to Git. Okay, so let's look at websites real quick. Okay, so our server is still getting set up. So I'm going to go to New, Compute, Website, and I'm going to do From Gallery. And the cool thing I like is a lot of people out there that just go, oh, I need to, before they figure out they need professionals to help them. They go, I just want to go create a website. So they can come in here and pick a platform and we'll deploy it for them. So for example, Joomla is in that list. We won't talk about the other ones now. And let's see, so I'm going to pick a... Now notice I have to pick a host name for my website, and down here it says .azurewebsites.net. In the totally free SKU, that's the only domain name you can have. If you want a real domain name, like my blog, brianhprince.com, then you go by the domain name, you point it to us, and then you kick up to the shared mode, which means you get a bunch of free resources for free, but if you go over it, you're going to pay for what you go over. On the totally free side, if you get an amount of resources for free, and if you use all that up, we stop your website. So this is really great for, I remember when we were building web apps, again in my consulting business, we would do a deploy for the customer to do a preview on, like a Q&A build. It doesn't matter what the domain name is there. So as a matter of fact, you don't want something like my website -test, because someone's going to figure that out and look at your test websites. So we would create some junk name here, like a code word, push it out under a weird domain name, and the customer can go and play with that and test it, preview it, give us feedback on it until we go real live. If here, Joomla we can deploy to SQL Azure, which is our SQL server in the cloud, or to MySQL. Now I think a lot of you probably use MySQL, and so we automatically can go out and create a MySQL database for you. And we have a partner called ClearDB that'll do that. You get a, I think it's a 10, gosh, I have to check if it's, I think it's 10 gigs for free. I pick which data center I want to deploy my website to. West US probably works for me. And I need to enter some passwords here. So. This will create the MySQL database that we're going to use for Joomla. I have to agree to ClearDB's terms. I don't know what they are. Does anyone ever read those? So this is, ignore the VM one here, this bottom one. It's deploying that. So this will take about a minute. It'll go out, create the database, provision the servers, deploy Joomla, wire everything up, and then deploy that sample data that a lot of starter sites have. And I'll be up and running in a couple of minutes. While that's happening, I will show you a different website that I'm running while that's building out. I have here my blog, which is running on WordPress, but I can go in and look at that. And the first thing is all the websites that you get. You get a lot of real high-level monitoring tags right out of the gate, so you don't have to go drill and look for that data. So here I can look at my CPU time, and right around midnight on November 13th, I got a real spike of 46 seconds. And you can see this spike recurs. That's either my dad reading my blog with F5 a lot, which I've taught him to do because that's how I get paid, or it's what? You SEO people know what this is.
Search engines.
Search engines, the spiders coming and hitting your site, driving it, and for some reason they all hit me at the same time. It's like they're waiting. So I can look at it. I can see, well, what's my data out, and I can track the outbound data and that sort of thing, right? Because all inbound data is free. It's the outbound data that you'll pay for. Well, you get a free allocation of bandwidth, but beyond that, I can look at. Frankly, what's even more important than that is my server errors. Ooh, so I had some errors. I had 9 errors a couple days ago, for example. I might want to drill into my logs and do that. And so if I want to do that, well, first I have a monitor here, which is more complete. I can look at, I can add a lot more perfmon counters into this grid here. I forgot to show you in the dashboard. If I scroll down, I can see I'm allowed to use 4 hours of CPU time a day, which is an infinite amount of time for a computer if you think about it. My blog today, it uses seconds a day, maybe a minute or 2 a day. You can see here I've used 0.09 hours in the past 8 hours. And then there's a governor on how many minutes you can use per minute. So I can use 2.5 minutes per 5 minutes. And that's just to protect, because this is a shared environment, from one customer soaking the CPU and hurting everyone else. And that's called a noisy neighbor problem. So we kind of govern you on that. What we'll do is we'll slow your processes down. The amount of file system I'm allowed to use, you get a gig on disk for free. I get, for free, 0.5 gig of RAM to use. Anyway, so I can go to, here in the configuration, my blog runs on 5.3. We just enabled 5.4 PHP. I can choose what domain names are host headered into my web app, and I just plug them in here. And about that logging I was talking about, I can come down here and turn on all of the typical web logging that I'm used to using. So all those web logs will get created on my FTP site, and I can download those and analyze those for those errors that we were seeing up above. When it comes to scale, this is the tab I'm going to do that on. So I can flip down to free mode instantly, and all I would do is have to hit save. And again, we give you a bunch of bandwidth and CPU and memory and all that for free. If you hit that, we just turn your site off. Again, that's great for those test websites and that sort of thing. Shared, and these are both shared infrastructures. They're both running on shared servers. So I like to call this free shared and pay shared. Paid shared, I'm still going to get that free allocation. But if I reach that limit, I just pay for what I use above that limit. Because I don't want my site to turn off. This is also, when I'm in shared mode, is when I can use a dedicated domain name or custom domain name. And again, even in shared, I can say, well, you know what? It's going to be a busy weekend. I can scale up and down. We're in preview mode, so we limit people to 3 instances. When we come out of preview, that'll be different. Instances is basically the number of servers you're running on. So we will copy your website out to 2 more servers, wire up the load balancer, boom, you're done. Right? Very easy to do. And a couple hours later, when I don't need that anymore, I can scale back down. Reserved, again, I can choose the size of CPU I need. Do my servers need 1 CPU, 2 CPUs, or 4? Let's say I have a lot of e-commerce stuff going on, so I can get 4 cores and 3 servers, so ultimately 12 cores running my app. Behind the load balancer, I'm going to start paying for those, obviously more than the free shared, but I only pay for what I'm using. So I kick into share to this reserved mode, spin out those servers, use them for the weekend, go back to shared mode at the end of the weekend, and I only paid for the weekend, right? Instead of for buying that hardware or committing to a 6-month contract or something like that. I'm going to hit discard because I don't need to run my blog on that much hardware. And here we go. So yeah, our Joomla World Conf is deployed. And let's see here. So let's browse to it. Oh, eBay keeps asking me for credentials. They're trying to get my corporate credentials. I know. Right? Is that what they're doing? I think if I just type this in, it'll work though. No, it wants me to. How am I getting to the management portal if authentication failed? Well, I guess I'm not getting out.
Are you on the guest Wi-Fi?
I'm on the video recording Wi-Fi.
Yeah. But you're.
Isn't that hooked up to the internet then?
Yeah.
It is because I've been getting to the management portal.
Yeah.
It's at least getting to our part of the internet. All right. Well, you guys know Joomla far better than I'll ever know it. So I don't need to. You just imagine a beautiful new Joomla website. So hopefully that's, so where you're going to use websites, I mean, you could use them for production. That's great, especially for customers that they don't really know how much demand they're going to have. You need that flexibility. But also just think with the 10 free websites, spin up the template, spin up that sample to that customer. Oh, so you got it pulled up? Great, so it's working great. You know, you want the password, it's all dots. Just type that in and you can mess with it. So there's a lot of, when you start thinking about the agility that the cloud can give you, the flexibility to be able to just spin that up, show the customer, shut it down. There's no reason leaving up and running all the time. A lot of great flexibility. We have a ton more services that you can leverage that we would take days talking about all these things. Media platforms. If you anyone doing any media online, right? So instead of building all the infrastructure to do all the video encoding and streaming and what we do, the dynamic streaming, if you see Netflix, that's our technology where if you're on a crappy internet connection, like your kids are playing Xbox, the video quality will go down, but it doesn't stop and buffer. It just keeps going. If it gets bad enough, it'll go down into ASCII mode. And then when the bandwidth gets better, it'll come back up all the way to HD mode. That dynamic bit throttling is stuff that we came up with. And we can also do live streaming, streaming of stored content, all that. So that whole media platform is there, very easy to use. The global content cache network, we have 28 servers around the world with a 3 terabit per second backbone. So who wants to play Black Ops on that, right? And that's actually the same network that Windows Update uses. I don't know if any of you have MSDN. You guys know what that is? Yeah, so MSDN, if you download anything from MSDN, it's the same network that is going on. So this is basically what this allows you to do is think of all the static resources on your website, the images, the videos, the CSS, the JavaScript, all that stuff. You can push that out to this global network, to the edge, if you will, of the internet, around the world. So no matter where the user is, when they go to download your style sheet or something like that, they're getting it from a local server instead of from your data center, which may be on the other side of the world. So it's a much faster experience. And again, this is something that you can turn on and off. So I have a busy week coming up, turn it on, get everything out, so everyone gets a really good experience. And when I'm past my busy week, I can turn that off. And I literally only paid a couple bucks to do that. What else? If you're looking for federated identity, we have platforms to do that. Global DNS. I briefly talked about a database. So we run, you can run MySQL or SQL Server in the cloud with us quite easily, so you don't have to worry about managing the infrastructure. It just magically appears. So that, one thing you can do here is keep your application local. You don't move it from where it is today, but take all of those static resources I was just talking about and move just those resources to the cloud. So here, I have HTML that goes out. The browser then goes to fetch the static resources. I'm going to move those to the cloud. We have better bandwidth that connect to the internet than pretty much any other hoster out there. We're going to move your resources up there. You're going to get those 6 replicas. You're just going to make a change down here, and I think there's actually a Joomla plugin that'll do this. That'll point that you have your library here locally, but it stores everything in the cloud. All your URLs going back to the client to download these images are just going to point up here. And now what we'll do is we'll create different containers, one for each type of static resource. Because there's this old rule that said a well-behaving network client should only make 2 connections per host name. So when they're connecting to www, they're theoretically only allowed to make 2 connections. So on a modern website with lots of stuff going on, that takes forever to download everything. So if we trick that out by using different host names up here, we can get multiple simultaneous connections to that. You can easily turn on CDN, you can get faster download, and you've removed a lot of overhead from your web server down here. Probably 30% more interactive users on that one server because that server isn't busy pushing out static resources. Now I lied about this 2 thing. That rule is true, but what happened is the IE guys, the Mozilla guys, the Safari guys, the Opera guys, all those browser nerds got together at some Denny's somewhere, and they agreed that with the modern internet we could make 8 connections per host name. So we're all breaking the rules together. There's an unwritten agreement so that modern browsers will make 8 connections, but this trick still works on modern fast home users. That global load balancing, so I could deploy my app, let's say, to Texas and to Amsterdam, and then we have free geographic DNS load balancing for you. So you turn that on, you tell it, please load balance to my 2 apps here, and then you can run it in one of 3 modes. You can run it in failover mode that says all traffic goes to data center 1, unless data center 1 completely burns down, then please route traffic to data center 2. We have round robin, so we just equally split the traffic between the 2 data centers as connections come in, regardless of where the user is. Or 3 is the geographic resolution. We will route them to the best data center based on where they're coming from, and we use lots of internet stuff to make that happen, right? So again, that's normally some big company stuff that you can get for free when you're using the cloud, when you're using Windows Azure. Really easy to do. Of course, it may not just be these 2. You may deploy it to all 8, and I see that failover scenario is really great when a customer wants high-end disaster recovery capabilities on their website, but they don't want to pay for it. So great, we'll deploy your app to both. We'll run it in dedicated failover mode, so all traffic is coming to the primary data site. We'll replicate your database to the other data center. And if that failover happens, we'll recover pretty quickly for almost no money, which is a lot cheaper. If you ever had to build a second data center, it's very, very expensive. There are commas involved in the price. So this makes it very easy, making any website of any size really be able to use this stuff. I think we're the first product at Microsoft to fully embrace all the platforms out there. So all of our toolkits and SDKs are all open source. So if you want to get the toolkit for .NET or PHP or Node or Java or Python and other, and actually this screenshot is out of date, we have more on this list. All of those SDKs have open sourced. All of our training kits have been open sourced. And you can natively build now. These aren't Windows-only tools. These tools run natively on Windows, natively on iOS, and natively on Linux. Right? This is not the Microsoft you might have remembered from 10 years ago. So I'm very proud of our team for that commitment. I just said the open source thing. So a lot of our stuff, all the open source stuff that we have, we're even hosting on GitHub because we know that's where a lot of open source teams are putting their stuff. That's where the community wants to put stuff. So that's where we've gone. So use the Force, Harry, as Gandalf said. And so if you want to get those free websites, go to ak.ms, whack Azure for free. You have to create an Azure subscription, and that's how you do it. You'll have to use a credit card. But that's to prove that you're 18 and you're a human and not a spammer. And it won't be charged. There's a spending cap put on, and you'll be blocked from going above the free resource cost. If you can remove that block, that's great, and you can spend all the money you want, but initially you'll have that block. You'll get everything for free for 90 days, but you'll always get those 10 websites for free. And if you're building mobile apps, we also have this thing called mobile services that we have SDKs for Windows 8, Windows Phone 8, iOS. We have Android support coming in a couple of weeks. If you want to really dig into the Windows Azure stuff, we have something called the Windows Azure Training Kit, which is gigs and gigs and gigs of labs and learning materials and presentations and samples. If you want to dig into any of those features, don't download it all to begin with. It will destroy you. If you're a startup of any size or type, go to Whack BizSpark, Microsoft.com, Whack BizSpark, sign up. I think it's $100 for a 3-year membership, and you get all of our software for free for development and production use. That includes, I think it's $4,000 worth of Azure for free per year. If you're not a big fancy startup and you're just a web design firm, we have something very similar called Website Spark. You sign up for that, you get a lot of our design tools, but more importantly, you'll get a ton of Azure stuff for free as well. I think about $1,500 worth a year on top of the normal free stuff that you get. So we're really trying to embrace and support the different communities that are out there and kind of giving them the tools they need to build some cool stuff. So I want to thank you for coming to the session. Have fun here at the rest of the conference, and I'll be around if you guys want to chat.